Okay.
Good. Thanks.
Okay. Start.
Yeah, please start, Fatima.
So for my side, I will present the results of the project enhancing biodiversity and resilience in crop production. Especially I am presenting the first result of the working package 1 and looking to the farmer perspective, and presenting the results from 2 case studies, Germany and France. Before to start to present the results, I will like to introduce briefly the idea behind this survey. So we want to hear the farmers. We want to see what is their attitude and perceptions and aspiration regarding the biodiversity measures and the policy programs. So we had open-ended questions, 5 sections. The first one, perception and attitude about biodiversity. The second section about experience with biodiversity in the farm. Then the perception and farm policies and program. And finishing with vision and aspiration, also challenges. And of course, we had some information about the farmers. In total, we conducted 18 interviews in Germany and 18 in France. So I'm presenting the result for both countries. I will start with this information regarding the farmers. So most of the farmers in both countries was male farmers. So we have just 1 female farm in Germany and 1 in France. If we looked at their activity, so if we look to Germany, so most of the farms, they are having full-time farming activity, which is around 72%. While in France is around also the same, 70%. The rest, they have a part-time activity, part-time farming activity. If we look to the age distribution, the German farmers are more or less between 40 to 60 years old. The France farmers are more distributed between ages. We have also very young farmers, less than 40 years old, and between also 20 and 30. But also the big part is between 40 and 60 years old. Now, if we look to the education level, so we have also a very high educated farmers. So in the France case study, we have half of the farmers as the highest education, and then especially 44% they are follow agriculture education, and just 6% have a high school certificate. In the case of German farmers, there are also very high educated farms. So we have tertiary education 46%, high education 44%, and just 13% they have a bachelor level. Now, if you look to the year experience in agriculture, first in France, we have different years of experience distributed between 1 year until 11 years, between 10, less than 10 years until 40. But we have most of the farms are concentrated in the between 30 and 40. And then some starting farms around less than 5% that they have less than 10 years experience in agriculture. On average, we have a 25 years average experience in agriculture for French farmers. For German farmers, we have also a distribution between the most of farmers are in the between less than 20 years experience, but also a big part between 20 and 30, and some also they have more even than 35 years experience. So in average, we have around 19 years experience in German farms. Now, if you look to the farm characteristic, so we start with the farm size. In the case of the France, we have a minimum of 110 hectares to the maximum of 820 hectares, with the average of 244. In the case of Germany, we have a heterogeneity in this distribution of the farm size. So the minimum of 40 hectares, but I think it was just 2 farms, and the maximum also 5,700 hectares was 1 farm, but most of the farms are in between, around 800, and the average we have in this case 1,130 hectares. Now, if we look to the statute of land in France, we have the farms 60% they have owned land, more or less the same result in Germany, 57%. Looking to the labor at the farm, employed by farm, we have here in the France case study, we have the most of the farm they have between 1 to 3 employees. In Germany, the most of them they have between less than nine employees, and we have also such a big farms that they have also between 20 to 30, or even we have 2 farms that they have more than 30 employees. If we look to these most cultivated crops, first, in the case of Germany, we have here in this figure that the most cultivated crops are wheat, followed by barley, canola, corn, and rye. And in the case of France, we have the most cultivated crop: wheat, potatoes, beets, oilseed, maize, and peas. Now if we look at it from other side, like how much number of crops by farm, starting by Germany, we have most of the farm, they have 5 crops by farm, so around 30% of the sample. And then also the second category, they have also between 6 to 7 crops by farm. In the case of France, we have most of the farm are behaving from 4, 5 to 6 crops. Now we're starting about their perception of the farms and the attitude about biodiversity measure. We start asking the farm what do farm implements in farms. So if we consider the French farmers, the most implemented measure is crop rotation and also no treatment area, cover crops, plant protection reduction, and no-till. We have also other practices like crop diversification, organic fertilizer, yellow sowing, and hedges. They are adopted by more than half a bit. And then in the last position, we have the smaller plots. If you consider the German farms, here we have the different measures. So we have also the implements crop rotation, regular also soil inspection. We have most of the farm also are using buffer strip, flower strip, and cover crops, and riparian buffer, and also measure to save energy. Around 80% are also making activity and engagements with local community regarding the environmental activity, permanent grassland, reduction in fertilizer, fungicide, and insecticide. And then we have also other measure, but in the last position we have organic farming. With it was the last the less adopted measure by the farmers. Now, if we ask the farmers about their perception of biodiversity, starting by the French farmers, what means for your biodiversity? The answer was soil fertility, microorganisms and insects, pests and auxiliaries, crop diversity, also flora and fauna. And the farmers consider that the aim is to try to do our best to maximize this biodiversity. But also it was like a perception like from some farmers that biodiversity is useful but also harmful, because they consider that their objective is to improve useful biodiversity, which is positive, in order to fight against pests and disease, which is a harmful biodiversity. So But one point that all the farmers are agrees is that we need to increase biodiversity, but not to the extent of the economic loss. So it was very clear that the farmers are considering like financial viability of this biodiversity measure as important. Now, if we regarding the question to the farms regarding the conventional farming, so the conventional farmers who are the most difficult to convince or to the most hard to accept or to consider that biodiversity measure that it can also be adopted without affecting the productivity and the yield. Regarding the relationship to neighbors, so the farmers said that the neighbors are doubtful, but if they are being explained about all these biodiversity practice, they are curious and happy about changes in practice. For the German farmers, biodiversity is mostly related to farm management and crop diversification. They consider biodiversity as flowering strips, like the same things, intercrops, crop rotation, diversity of soil organism, insects, animal and plants, and also diversity of crops. They consider also that there is a disadvantage or like a negative aspect of increasing biodiversity. So this is speaking about also pest, insect, wolf, and economic disadvantages. The most one other very important point for the German farmers is this lack of marketing opportunity. So the farmers want to increase the diversity of crop rotation, and sometimes farmers, they don't have enough information about that. So they consider that cover crop are perceived to have a positive effect in soil fertility, but farmers mention difficulty in finding the right crops and establishing a system that works for them. And regarding negative perception of the farmers, so they consider that the society consider them like a scapegoat for climate change. There's a misunderstanding of farming practice and then their hard work, and also this kind of negative perception, they feel it also on the road when driving the tractors. There is no respect to the farmers. Now looking to the perception regarding the public policy and programs, starting by German farmers. Almost all the farmers that we interviewed in Germany, they receive subsidies for flowering stripe, and some farmers are additionally involved in local and regional programs. There are different programs following the different German states. The advantage here is that respondents knows that the new program and regulation have improved agriculture practice comparing to the previous generation. And then farmers also take into account this type of subsidies and the costs and the practicability of a program when they decide to join one program or not. And this also is very important, the involvement of local community and knowledge sharing with the neighboring farmers as an important part of their work. Disadvantage. So they are complaining, the German farmers are complaining about spending time in the office for administration, which is very increasing with different measures. So we have here the farmers said would prefer spending more time in the fields instead of the office. Other point that the farmers consider very difficult is this stricter monitoring and also little flexibility and the bureaucracy that is come with these measures. And then also every year there is like a fast change in this regulation, which means for the farm a lot of time spending to adapt to the new regulation. As a solution, they propose is to have more freedom, autonomy, and independence when implementing biodiversity in heightened practice, and they call for objective-oriented policy and flexible funding application. Now, regarding the policy, this perception regarding the public policy and program, the French farmer receive also the common agricultural policy subsidies, but they feel under constant surveillance, for example, the satellite, and fear of losing as part of these subsidies. They are also in general have lost trust in the government and its policy. They feel like they are quite disconnected from reality. Governments systematically impose new constraints, new regulation, and a lot of bureaucracy and control programs are not always well designed to achieve this objective. So the solution, the French farmer, they ask also for more freedom, autonomy, and independence in their work. They would like to see objective-oriented policy instead of being told at each step of their work. One section was, what is your perception regarding organic agriculture? This was, here we have for German farmers. So the farmers, they are not against organic agriculture, but they choose the conventional one because first, financial reasons, and then they believe organic agriculture cannot feed the world. But they choose also the land-sparing uppers, land sharing, preference for intensive agriculture to leave plots for flower strip, for example. What is the driver of change for the German farmers? Motivations. First point is economic reasons, so the monetary gains and healthy ecosystem, and generational change, holding over a healthy soil to the next generation. As a limitation, they see that this is increasing level of bureaucracy, high prices for local mixture seeds, financial loss given the input cost of input investment and lower yield, a lack of marketing opportunity and practicability and availability of seeds. So this is the main limitation for German farmers. Now, what is the aspiration for French farmers? So regarding the soil conservation agriculture, they consider it like a very technically very challenging. Regarding the agriculture, they don't believe 100% organic farming. They believe that the market outlets are saturated and is too restrictive. There's other initiative called these high environmental value certification that seem to emerge as an alternative option between conventional and organic agriculture. So most farmers are trying to reach this certification, but there's a disadvantage that this is a French certification, is not has not value for international exports. So farmers were promised financial bonus with the certification that they haven't received. Regarding the agroforestry, they have been mentioned as a long-term objective by two farmers. So what do farmers develop in the ground? So they take part in working group called Economic and Environmental Interest Group. The advantage of this group that the farmer receive advice, they can decide in their own objective, can work in groups, and it's reduce the feeling of loneliness front of the risk taking. They develop also an alternative to organic and conventional agriculture, where farmers could be rewarded for their effort. So the advantage is working group receive some subsidies, work toward technical objectives which are not restrictive. Now here we have the aspiration and challenges for the German farmers. Success was mostly defined in financial terms, but also personal happiness was also considered very important by the German farmers. Lever to success for German farmers are technical innovation, policy changes, market price, direct marketing, and establishment of local production chain. Now, what challenges they consider the German farmers? We have negative public opinion about the farmers. We have financial pressure, bureaucracy, climate change and drought, and increasing size of the farm. So with this, I finished this presentation regarding the result of the first result of the interview with French and the German farmers, and then yeah, please leave the floor to Peter for.
Thank you, Fatima, for the nice presentation. Are there questions from the panel participants?
So we have a couple of questions. How many do we have time for?
Now we take 5 minutes,
right.
more or less. If someone wants to present his question himself or herself, just put on your video first. Otherwise, I would ask Hannah or Alma to read up the questions. Alma, you are unmuted, please.
So I would start with a question by Bill Grayson, who asks how much reduction of herbicides and other chemicals do farmers claim to have made over what time scale? And I think that is to Fatima.
How much reduction of
herbicide and other chemicals?
I mean, we don't really put in the question how much is. We just ask them if they are taking part of these measures. So it was like open-ended questions, yes or not. So we don't know exactly how much is.
Okay, thank you. Then I would carry on to the next question, which is on the trade-off between carbon sequestration and also nitrogen fertilization, because to increase soil organic matter, we would need to increase also nitrogen, but there is obviously a trade-off when we want to reduce or minimize nitrogen leaching and runoff. So how would you evaluate or evaluate that trade-off, also to Fatima and also Miriam?
Yeah, this is more related to the first presentation. It's more little information that was out of our aims. Our concentration was more on soil biodiversity and soil health. So this is more detailed, maybe investigation that was out of our aims.
Okay, thank you. So next we have one more question for Fatima. So this is also by Bill Grayson. So how, or if we did, or if there were organic farmers that were interviewed to compare attitudes?
We don't really look for which farms is. We just take a bit sampling like randomly. So we don't look really for organic farm, but we ask the farmers about their opinion regarding organic agriculture. So we don't make comparison.
Okay, then I think we have time for one last short question, which is by Maike Habekos on the criteria which the farmers were selected with, and how representative we would consider the survey.
Unfortunately, we don't make really a sampling approach, because it was at the Corona time, and then it was difficult to even access or to have access to the farmers like in a normal way. So we just have a list of different different farmers and try to contact them, and the one that we get in touch with them then accepts our interview. So we made it. So it wasn't really a sampling approach here. And then here is also is not really a quantitative analysis, or we are making more interview explorative analysis, trying to speak with the farmers and to get interacted with them about their perceptions and attitude, but in open-ended questions, more like a representative sampling for making a quantitative analysis.
Okay, thank you. I think with that we have reached the amount of time allotted for the questions.
Okay. So then we can start the discussion, and I would first do a round within the panel. So my first questions go to Anja Gladbach from Bayer, who is financing this study. Could you explore a little bit what is the interest of Bayer in biodiversity conservation, and how does Bayer could contribute or thinks can contribute to conservation of biodiversity in the future?
Yes, thanks, Peter, for the question, and happy to share some background on that. So maybe at first, input provider for agriculture engages in biodiversity. However, if you look at all high-level studies which look at potential influences on biodiversity or drivers for loss, what pops up prominently always is land use change. And agriculture per se is land use change. So you take natural land and use it for agricultural production, irrespective in which form. So it's not what was before a natural habitat. And so we as Bayer are going through an evolution as well in that. So we started off as an input provider to enable farmers to use their land efficiently and be productive on it. However, what is ongoing currently that we are switching from being just an input provider to a solution provider. And solutions in our perspective don't need just to look at productivity alone, but with the developments we have in terms of digitalization, technology, etc., we are actually able to introduce other parameters as well as the solution. So, and that would as well include biodiversity. And from our perspective, we would like to do what to do to be most efficient in that. So, and for that, we need to engage in that scientific discussion, exploring what are measures that farmers can take to enhance biodiversity, especially in intensified production systems. What are measures that are potentially beneficial to both productivity and biodiversity? How can we build bridges or bridge that gap between what Peter mentioned at the beginning, nature and agriculture uses? So how can we be an enabler to make it for farmers easier to implement the right measures? I think one of the farmers, Fatima, in your research said that it's difficult to select the right cover crops, for example. So how can we be a provider of information, of solutions? How can we make it as easy as possible for farmers to overcome bureaucracy, etc.? So we are here to learn, to conclude for us the measures that are most efficient on a global scale and where we can contribute as an enabler and facilitator.
Yeah. Spannend. I missed the word. Do others want to respond on this or have further questions towards Anja? Don't be shy, so come up. I can continue, of course. So,
sorry, we have a question.
Yeah.
But I think this might be more suited to a later time in the discussion when we have heard from all of the panelists.
Yes. The question is, what do you think about agroecology as a bridge between agriculture and nature? Agroecology as a solution. Is something that would be in the scope of solutions you provide from Bayer?
So what we to get to that question, in principle, we would like to enable farmers to work with the system of their choice. So we see that as kind of a toolbox where we enable farmers to select the tools that are fitting their production system, their economic constraints, the specific soil that they're facing with the crops they want to grow, and where they are located globally. So it's not that we exclude any, let's say, customers from that, but if there are elements in agroecology which we can support with, for example, digital solutions, looking at making it easier, providing tools to get there, we are happy to do so. And as well interested in learning from these systems. So what are elements that we can take into our toolbox? So we're definitely open to learn here and advance. So we have a large R&D organization which not only deals with chemistry, but as well with questions of ecotox, of ecology, and yeah, so keen to learn.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay, so if there are no other questions to Anja, I would ask Jesus about his results from his studies also regarding farmers and how they behave, what are barriers and in the view of farmers, and how interventions can foster perhaps further adoption of biodiversity.
Yeah, thanks very much, Peter. And once again, thanks also to ZALF and to Bayer for inviting me here. A disclaimer that anything that I say, it's in my personal opinion and not representing an official view of the European Commission as it's standard from us. And let me start stating why do we need to care about biodiversity. It's not a trend, it's a need. I mean, the latest assessment of the International Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services acknowledges the decreasing trend on biodiversity levels all across activities and signals very clearly to agricultural related biodiversity as one of the fastest declining. And the fact that those are declining per se couldn't be an issue. But the fact is that with these declining levels of biodiversity, we are putting at risk the capacity of the agroecosystem to provide both its market and non-market benefits. So it's not an option to continue this trend because we are putting at risk the main input that we are trying to defend, that is feeding the world. With a decreasing biodiversity, we are putting at risk the basic function of agriculture, that is assuring yields. So having said that, we have seen that some of these options as cover crops have trade-offs, and some others, like I've seen in the chat about high productive agroecological systems, could not put at risk these trade-offs. But nevertheless, what we see is that there is some kind of general pattern by which the common trend on the agricultural sector in Europe, it's more one that it's focusing more on production and is somehow neglecting the overall biodiversity function of the agroecosystem. And why is this happening? I mean, one could think, okay, farmers are pure rational industries or business, bigger or smaller, and basically what they see is a trade-off between the private income stream. So somehow the practices that are enhancing biodiversity are not profitable for them as individuals, and if they are profitable for society at large, they are either not perceived as such by farmers. They don't perceive that society is rewarding them, not necessarily in a monetary fashion, for being more caring of the environment. They don't get social recognition. They don't get a bigger support by society, or the amounts that are being paid by policy are not enough to compensate these costs. So in the structure of non-economic factors that might be driving this transition that we published in 2019 with some of my colleagues, we tried to see the myriad of other effects that might be driving the reluctance of farmers to adopt more sustainable practices. So the closest to the decision would be the capacity from farmers themselves to understand or how they perceive these trade-offs that were mentioned by I forgot your name, sorry. I'm very, very sorry. So basically, one thing is the cost and benefits that we are capable of measuring on the field. And the other thing is how they perceive these costs and benefits. And it's also an issue of the nature of those benefits on-farm or off-farm for me or for the rest of society, and the timing of those benefits. Increasing soil carbon on soils can deliver benefits further down the way. And as I saw from the presentation of Fatima, 40%, between 30 and 40% of the land that is managed by these farmers are not theirs. So why would I invest on the quality of an asset that doesn't belong to me? And here, if I try to, I was looking at some numbers in the report that I share on the chat on cover crops that is based on field work in Spain, Romania, France, and the Netherlands. What we see is that the biggest difference between those farmers that have cover crops and those farmers that do not have cover crops is that an astonishing 30% of farmers that have not adopted cover crops have no idea about them. Because those that know, okay, there's a bit, there's a small difference because there's a bigger difference, there's a bigger split between those that perceive that cover crops are good and are providing benefits to their farm than those that perceive that cover crops would give a negative impact to the farms. And when we try to ask them to quantify, funny enough, non-adopters are underestimating benefits much more than underestimating costs. So the real costs declared by farmers who adopted were about 200 euros per hectare. Let's not go into details. And the farmers that didn't adopt believe that it would cost them 100 euros. So it's a 2-to-1. However, the actual benefits, the difference between adopters and non-adopters was nearly 4-to-1. Adopters were declaring that they got like 170 euros of return, while non-adopters believed that they would only get 42. So there's a problem on the perception of the benefits that cover crops are going to bring to the farm rather than the costs that they're going to bring to the farm. So I've mentioned knowledge, I've mentioned perceived costs and benefits, and there's also an issue about perceived risks. Farmers like to be in control, and they believe that by implementing some of these solutions, these agroecology or biodiversity friendly practices, they might lose the capacity to manage the farm. And this relates mostly when we are going to IPM or organic, where they see a limitation on the toolbox they have to control the farm. They cannot use so many plant protection products, they cannot use so much fertilizer, and they feel that there's an enhanced risk in this transition. The second bunch of factors that would affect this is social factors, and here basically we have what society is expecting from farmers. So this is social norms, and still there's a view of a messy farm and a clean farm, an homogeneous plot with all the crops. That is being a good farmer. If your farm produces a lot and it looks nice, that is a good farmer. While sometimes these measures that are more biodiversity friendly lead to more mosaic landscapes that might be perceived as beautiful from a pure aesthetic perspective, but it looks as messy and you are not doing your job right. Your farm is not clean. So there's some kind of signaling and descriptive norm that has not been clear mentioned to farmers, and also what the farmers believe that they have to do, it's still about providing food, which is the main output, and getting a reward in the market and making a living for their families. And last but not least, here would be the dispositional factors. These are further away and it's more difficult to tackle them, but also in Fatima's presentation, we could see that the attitudes to the environment and the personality of farmers is very diverse. And there's a bunch of farmers that we have identified in many studies that seem to be more risk-taking or environmentally aware. And this has to do about the level of income, the level of professionalization, how much income they get from the farm and how much income they don't get from the farm. And to wrap up what I'm trying to see, what we see is that basically cover crops adoption in those areas where they have been adopted, it has been mainly policy driven, and not policy driven because of the level of subsidies, but policy driven because it's mandatory as part of the greening conditions to get the payments. And when you ask them about, when you ask farmers, what do they perceive that cover crops bring to the farm? There's no big difference between adopters and non-adopters. They are all aware that cover crops somehow bring environmental benefits, but the awareness about the climate change mitigation benefits are much lower. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jesus. That was a really comprehensive overview of factors affecting uptake of biodiversity-related measures by farmers. Are there questions towards Jesus?
I see one in the chat.
Yeah.
So basically, indeed, from our 623 farmers, on average, the costs of cover crops were higher than the benefits. And this mismatch, which was for the adopters like 16 euros per hectare, and for the non-adopters, they believed that it was mid-20s, so a bit higher, in most cases was compensated by the subsidies that they would be getting. So, I mean, there might be a case if you take into account the whole, not 1 year, but more than 1 year, that this gets closer, and cover crops would be one of these practices that has a win-win. But we have seen that even in a win-win situation, there are still trade-offs for cover crops. So it's not a silver bullet that enhances all dimensions of the farmer.
Okay.
One comment to Jesus.
Yeah.
Yes, the toolbox of the farmers is shrinking by the government, and we are more tied up to rules from year to year. And that's the reason why most of the farmers have a negative opinion to cover crops, for example. Actually, we have the last year with glyphosate in Germany. I think in Europe the same. And cover crops, the ultimate ratio, the last tool is glyphosate, or was glyphosate, and most of the farmers think, okay, I have no last tool in the spring to kill the cover crops in the field. And so they decide, okay, I plow the field in the autumn and I have a clean field, and I have no problems with the spring seeding. That's one of the topics to the what you talk toolbox. The toolbox is more and more shrinking, and yes, the rest I can underline. Thank you.
Okay. Are there other remarks to or questions? Otherwise, yeah, you want to say something, Jesus, or no? You're muted.
Yeah, I was looking for the mute. Yeah. No, I mean, indeed, I totally sympathize with Stefan's opinion. I mean, the reduction on the degrees of freedom of a farmer to manage its farm is going there. And also, as I think Fatima was mentioning, the way to promote environmentally friendly practices is focusing a lot on specific practices rather than empowering the farmer to deliver some kind of benefit that we could discuss. It's difficult to measure, and it might not be really attributed to the farmer because there can be some external factors. But there has to be some kind of empowerment again, and trust to the farmer as an agent on the land, and of course being accountable if they don't deliver. And for that also the capacity of input providers or service givers to empower them also to make sure that they will be able to deliver what is expected from them by society.
Yeah. Okay, I would like to continue with Stefan. So, what is what do you expect from researchers in the first place? Let's say to do about this situation. So of losing your toolbox, as you said.
From the research, I think we need more information to the government, to the politics, that the way we are going is a good way, and that we, for example, we need a wider toolbox. When the research can communicate to the politics, okay, for example, glyphosate is not bad. It's just a tool. It's the ultima ratio on the field. Then that's the message they have to hear it by the politics. Mm-hmm. That's also my motivating to be here in this panel. The German and also the French farmers were on the streets since 2000, I think, what we have 2018, 2019. We organized big demonstrations in Berlin with more than 10,000 tractors, and all in the newspaper are just the negative message, not the good message. We are feeding the country, and we can design by diversity on the fields. And so from the research, I think we need more information to the government, to the politics. And you need from the politics more topics you can research on. I think CRISPR-Cas9 gene technology is also not bad. Also, this is a message. It's a chance to reduce herbicides, pesticides, fungicides in the fields. It's also your task to inform the politics.
Okay, we take that up.
Okay.
Okay. So Christoph Felgentreu is not here, I think. Yeah, should we open the discussion now for the panel in order to have at least the last 15 minutes open for everybody to ask questions of any kind? I think so maybe something which some questions so partly already answered by Jesus and by Fatima is what aspects do we think do we have to take into consideration based on the farmer's perspective to increase biodiversity adoption in a general way? So we heard from Stefan that he needs more options. Are there concrete things we can offer here?
Maybe I can add to that.
Yeah.
So I mean, looking to the both results for Germany and France, I realized that some very common points between farmers in Germany and France. The farmers are always complaining about this common agricultural policy measure, that there are like a lot of bureaucracy and not very well designed these programs. And also they're asking for more freedom and more funding, flexible funding application. On the other side, if we look to the motivation, we ask them what motivates you to adopt, they consider three important points. The first one is the most one of the normal, I will say the basic is economic reasons. So the payments incentive to have incentive that they can adopt. But also they consider the fact to have a healthy ecosystem and generation change, and to have a healthy soil to the next generation. And I think in here we can consider also other factors rather than economics ones, more like behavioral factors that you need to take into consideration. And these also we can consider all these what the society expected from our farms and what also the farms can bring to the society. So I think this is a very important point to take into consideration. Other very important point that I see also from these comparing these both results, that these first both of the farms in Germany and France, they consider there is a missing knowledge how to implement some measures that enhance the biodiversity, and proposing also all these working in group and sharing knowledge. So missing knowledge and sharing knowledge means like they are missing these how to make it. The German farms speak about this marketing, lack of marketing, how to for the cover crop, for example, but also this shared knowledge with other farms and neighbors and etc. So so I think this is which fits also what Jesus said about all these social norms, and then what the impact of other behavioral factors, different the economic ones, and how we can implement and use that to design the future policy programs regarding biodiversity measures.
Yeah, thank you. There is a little discussion ongoing about glyphosate and ecological agroecology, but I'm not sure if it's good to go into that discussion.
Well, I mean, this even if you don't go into the discussion, the perspective that has to be added is if there are alternative measures, what do those mean for the farmer? Because it's either an issue of a lack of awareness. I mean, we could all believe that, okay, farmers know nothing and we know better. I don't believe that that is the case, just in case. There's also what it imposes. I mean, one could think, okay, glyphosate, it's super easy. If the thing goes wrong, I go into my tractor, I put the glyphosate and I kill the weeds.
Yeah.
And then the other might impose a much more intense workload in moments where maybe the soil is wet and the tractor cannot go into there. It can be mechanical weeding that with high oil prices impose a lot of cost. So we need to understand better what the full program and how the farmer perceives that full program. Because many times I think that even I think, okay, I have this great idea. I mean, I've tested it, I've done an experiment with some farmers, and I've seen that if I move this lever, all the farmers go this way. And then in the end, that doesn't really work. And I believe that some of the main, not instructions, but paths that research is going into co-creation and a much more participatory way to do our research will allow us to find these ways where we can assure that we both maximize the environmental sustainability, but also the capacity of farmers to get a reward for the services that they are doing.
Yeah, no, I think we can agree all there. There is one remark or question. The recent increases in farm input costs must be starting to change farmer attitudes to high inputs. So is there a change already going on because of the high fertilizer costs, for example, at the moment? To maybe a question to Stefan Wernicke.
Yes, the high fertilizer cost, when I talk to other farmers, is a real problem. Most of us buy the fertilizer last autumn. Good luck. It was very, very good for prices less than 500 euros per ton. Actually, we are around about at 1,000 euros per ton nitrogen with 27% nitrogen. So But I think most of us didn't change the complete system, how they work on the farm. The time that we have changes are too fast that we can adapt every week a new system.
Yeah.
So and that is what I mean with toolbox. When it's forbidden to do something on a farm, that is not forbidden for each farmer for each year. There's just one tool less in the toolbox, and I cannot adapt on weather effects, on cost effects so fast, I cannot change my farming so fast. Actually, we have this problem with the fertilizer cost. Yes, okay. I have pieces on the field, and so I didn't want to sell them. I take them in my barn, and could be possible that I have more of them next year to save the cost. But yes, this is my only option actually. But
okay, I didn't get this option, but yeah.
This is an option. But on the other hand, where I can save cost, the cost is employees. Where I can optimize my farm with digitalization, everything is talking about. That means I reduce the staff on the farm. The next tractor is bigger. The next fertilizer, the next plow is bigger, or the next seeding machine is bigger, and digitalization is helping them. Near of me, they are bringing manure on the field, Gülle, to the field actually. This company is an external company. They are working 24 hours, 6 days per week. In 2 shifts, the machines are running around the clock to reduce the cost. So, but on seeding, on spraying, on fertilizer, I cannot make more cost savings without impact on the harvest. The harvest is the main goal. And when I reduce the fertilizer, I reduce the harvest.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, coming back to this high input prices, I mean, the high input prices are happening also at a moment where we have high output prices. So it also depends a bit of the expectations that farmers have. I mean, if now, as Stefan mentioned, he has to buy fertilizer for next season, and it's twice as expensive as the one he bought last October, it depends a lot of how much he believes that he's going to see these high output prices. Because if input prices rise but output prices rise, you will be able to buy the same fertilizer you bought last time, and that is not so clear. And what is going to be the policy interventions if we see prices rising very much? Will they try to limit them? And then, okay, I paid for my fertilizer very expensive, but then when I have to sell, yes, I won't be able to.
This happened, I think, in South America years ago. The farmer take all the harvest in the barns, and nothing is go to the market, and the prices was rising more. When the government is cutting the prices, the farmer is just thinking in cash flow and nothing more.
Okay. So maybe we can come back a little bit to biodiversity and in concluding.
The challenge for biodiversity is that I make a clear decision. What are my good fields? What are my bad fields? And all the bad ones I take in government projects for biodiversity. When I have a lot of obstacles on a field, high voltage things, how they call it, electrical pylons, then okay, then it's easy to make a
flower strip or something.
flower straps on it. Yes, why not? No?
Yeah, okay.
I have one of my fields is exact. It's a triangle and make it to a rectangle. The rest are flower stripes. So it's cost effective. I save pesticides. I save fertilizer. I save machine time, and I do something for the environment. Okay, why not? And I think this decision will come more and more over. And it, on the other hand, all these small fields need a lot of stuff, so I lose stuff on the farm.
Okay, so there are some options for biodiversity. I feel it's a bit difficult to summarize this webinar. We heard a lot of the different reasons for farmers to adopt or not to adopt, the obstacles from, let's say, societal perception up to the pure economics, of course. Does someone else want to conclude here? Otherwise, I think we can close the webinar for today. We will continue to work on agricultural options, and also, of course, communicate with policymakers about the problems we perceive. And I think we take also the input from Stefan as very important into our further discussions. So thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you very much,
Yes,
everybody.
I'm very glad that I'm on this panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.